Welcome in, everybody, to GC Live. It is a Thursday edition, like it's the football season. Always good to be here with you. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuva. A lot going on in the world of Gamecock athletics. Later this afternoon, depending on when you're watching, we're going to have the press conference for baseball, introduce a new head coach. And then there's always been a lot going on with men's golf and as well as softball, too. Intern Joe, I'm going to let you lead things off here. Got to shut the door. The girlfriend's cat is going pretty crazy, so no one's dying in the background. There's just the cat just playing with the mouse or something. I don't know. But I'll let you lead things off. Today's topic is strengths and weaknesses of this South Carolina offense. So do you want to start with strengths? You want to go with weaknesses? Where do you want to go with this one?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can start with strengths of this offense. There's a lot to love in it. And so I guess we'll start with strengths. It starts with the quarterback. Everything we've been hearing about Lenore Sellers has been all that and more. We're just waiting to see, him play, consistent minutes, consistent starting reps. And obviously you added a bunch of guys in the portal for the wide receiver room. You've got young studs like Mazio Bennett coming up. Brian Gatling as well. And then you've got the tight end room, Josh Simon, Michael Smith, a bunch of dudes in that room as well. And then an offensive line that, is going to see development. You need to see development out of your offensive line. A lot of improvement guys that are going to be stepping up on the offensive line. Then a couple returning guys that, made a big leap last year in Tree and Tro. And then you also have got to factor in Marquis Anderson, knock on wood. Hopefully he stays healthy. So there's a lot to love about this offense. And when you look at it as a whole, it screams potential. The only downside of it, realistically, big picture here is that, it's inexperienced, but everything that we're hearing, Mike, I mean, from inside the building, outside the building, everything like that, you have a lot of skilled guys in on this offense. And if they can find a way to get things going, find momentum, that they could be really dangerous this year. And I mean, obviously defense, we talked about it last week. It stacks up pretty nicely. A lot of veteran guys. This offense is kind of the opposite, right? A lot of young guys, a lot of guys that are gunning for something to prove. So if they can get it all together and figure out a way to stay consistent, Mike, there's going to be a lot of things to be talking about this offense.
Yeah, when we talk about some of those weaknesses, concerns, whatever way you want to phrase it, and Joe, you alluded to it before, there's going to be a lot of new faces. There's going to be a lot of new faces. And that's going to be one of the strengths that we talk about when we talk about depth, experience in certain positions. But at the same time, too, it can certainly be a concern. I wouldn't say it's a weakness. I wouldn't say it's a weakness necessarily. You look at, obviously, starting with Lenore Sellers, a very dynamic quarterback. While he can do things, and we've seen it in his limited time of playing, whether it be in garbage time towards the end of games last season, whether it be in the spring game, whether it be in the spring game last season. There's certainly things that he is going to be able to bring to the table that Rattler just didn't. And that's no fault of Rattler. They just have a different style of play. Having said that, though, you're also losing a very talented quarterback, a guy that has a lot of experience. And there's a reason why Rattler was the first Gamecock quarterback drafted in over friggin' 30 years, to go back all the way to the Todd Ellis days, for crying out loud. So I think the concern at quarterback is there's going to be at some point some type of growing pain, right? I mean, Lenore's, he's never thrown an interception before. I mean, he's going to throw an interception at some point in his career. No one's perfect. So how does he respond back to that? Wide receiver room, a lot of new faces in that room, a lot of new faces. How does that stack up? You don't have Xavier Luedecke in there anymore. A year ago, heading into the season, though, You were expecting Juice Wells to be that guy. Well, what happens? Juice goes through an injury, decides towards the end of the season, I'm not going to play. Think I'm going to, get healthy or what. So he's basically done for the majority of the season, pretty much the entire year, for crying out loud. What happens though? Luedecke steps up. Who can be that guy in that room? There needs to be at least two guys that step up, because when you have a younger quarterback, he needs as many weapons as possible. So I think, to me, and never mind the fact you have a new wide receiver coach too, trying to get on the same page as the offensive coordinator, trying to figure out everything. So I think more than anything, it's how can you help out the young quarterback? How can you create separation in a room like wide receiver that is going to have a lot of new faces, that there's a lot of questions about? Running back wise, a lot of new faces. I think the concern I have in the running back room, Joe, is how healthy does that running back room look heading into camp? I mean, we're looking at it right now.
That's one, yeah.
You would assume Juju will be good. You would assume Rocket Sanders will be good. But how healthy can they look? How healthy will they be? How healthy will they be heading into week 1? I think a guy like Oscar Attaway, we know what he can bring to the table. Yeah. Certainly, well, all the wide running backs that we've talked about, that we're talking about with the new transfers, 3 transfers come on in here. Are they going to be able to get acclimated as quickly as you want them to? Because obviously, as the year goes on, you get accustomed to the playbook. We saw that even going back to last season. A little different scenario for some of those guys, because obviously, Mario Anderson's coming in. He's coming from the D2 ranks. A guy like Oscar Attaway, yes, he's coming from a smaller school, but at the same time, too, there were more things that he was used to seeing at North Texas in comparison to what Mario saw playing at Newberry. So these are a couple things that come up offensive line-wise. Number one, can they stay healthy, right? I mean, you look at it on paper, and we'll get into some of the strengths here in a minute. This isn't just going to be, just a crapshoot right here. We're talking about the negatives here, concerns. Offensive line-wise, can you find those 5 guys that can play alongside each other? You have a lot of talent in that room. You have a lot of experience in that room. But what does it look like as far as trying to find 5 players who can build a rapport and play next to each other in a cohesive unit that will allow you to do these other things, going back to the obvious, which is having a young quarterback?
Yeah, most definitely. I did have one more concern with the running back room. Obviously, you mentioned guys being healthy, and it's part of that. But I mean, when guys are, in and out, you want a full room going into summer camp, a fully healthy room. That way you can establish, what the rhythm looks like out of your running back room. Because if you can get into SEC play and you know what running backs you need for what situations, and know how to get each one of them going, that's ideal. And you don't want to have to go through that like week 7, week 8, like we saw with, Mario Anderson and even Christian Beal-Smith and Marshawn Lloyd. Like, it took them forever to figure out the rhythm and how they were going to play. And then they were hurt, banged up. And then it was just a crapshoot. Like it was a mess. So you want to be able to, get guys like OA3 in a rhythm. You want to be able to get Juju McDowell, Rocket Sanders too, in a rhythm, find, the perfect slot for them. And so that way they know, when their name's called to get ready to go, and that they have a chance to break the game open essentially. So, that was the one concern for the running back room. I think, with as many guys as you have, when you factor in Jawan Howell as well, another talented kid that they like, there's a lot of potential for this running back room to do some damage in the SEC. So, and then, I mean, Mike, you brought up the wide receiver room again. I really like it. Again, it's really inexperienced, which is the one ding on him, but somebody's going to have to step up. And if that has to be a freshman, I mean, we'll see. Nick Harbor, he was on the cusp of being the number 1 last year. So he's been running track. And I mean, that's another question mark with that room, is like, is Nick Harbor going to be ready to go? Seeing him at camps and stuff, I mean, his body looks great. He's in shape clearly, and looks like he's ready to go. Might have to put on a couple more pounds, but looking good. So it'll be interesting to see when you have a guy who's on the cusp like Harbor, with the new wide receivers coach, with Mike Furry in there. I think, they're going to be doing some damage. It's just a matter of adjusting, getting to know everyone, and getting ready to go, competing.
So when we get into talking about the strengths, we'll be able to transition this smoothly, because a lot of the things we're talking about here, we're mentioning Lenora Sellers, right? The fact that we haven't seen him enough. Oscar Attaway, some of the transfers at running back, or whatever the case may be, transfers at wide receiver. They've proven it, but it's one of those things you just have to wait and see here. Because when we talk about some of the strengths, and we'll talk about at the running back position, we'll talk about at the offensive line position, there's a lot of guys who have proven it at other places. And that's one big thing that if they're able to do here, then, I mean, you talk about that running back room. We've talked about it a lot. It looks night and day different than what it looked like heading into last season, and certainly what it looked like heading into the offseason. Mm-hmm. So while it is a strength, in my opinion, we'll get into those strengths, it's also one of those things that we're sitting here and we have to make assumptions about until we see these guys go out there and prove it at South Carolina. How many times we've seen in the Shane Beamer era that they've brought in players from smaller schools and they've had success here via the transfer portal. They came on in here and they did a great job. We've seen it a lot, not even just smaller school, bigger schools too. But what does it look like at USC? And that's ultimately all that matters. How do they fit into the culture? How do they fit into the scheme? And more importantly, how do they execute here? I mean, that's what it comes down to. So when we look at a lot of these positions, quarterback, and certainly this isn't just on the transfer portal players, it's just in general, a lot of new faces either going to be starting or playing more. What does it look like? What does it look like at South Carolina when you have a lot of these players who are either A, going to be playing more, you would expect to play more, or B, you have new faces at USC? And that's the big question. That's the big question. So we can sit here and say, hey, Lenore Sellers, he's going to do some great things. Hey, Oscar Attaway, transfer running backs coming in. Oh, they're going to do great things. Rocket Sanders, right? We know what he's capable of doing when he's healthy. But that's the other thing. He's coming back from a shoulder injury. He missed spring football. Is he going to be 100% heading into week one? I've shared my thoughts about it already. And I hope to God he's as close as possible. But at the same time, too, I would not be shocked if you see a lot of DJ Braswell and a lot of Oscar Attaway in particular. Juwan Howe, could throw him in there as well. But those two running backs in particular, I expect to see a lot of them week one. Because if Rocket's coming back, it's not just this isn't just a video game, right? Video game, all right, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, your guy's health is going up and all that kind of stuff. NCAA football comes out a month from now, so people know exactly what I'm talking about that. If you think back in the day, think of Madden, right? Each week goes by, the health gets better. Well, guess what? He needs to go out there and he needs to take some hits. He'll get that in practice, in fall camp, but how much of it will he get? Will they kind of baby him in there? Which honestly, can't blame a coaching staff, but he needs to get hit at some point. So if he is close to 100%, or he feels like he's 100%, or he is 100%, you still want to be smart about it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You're playing Old Dominion week one. And you know that after that, the schedule only gets tougher, especially in conference play. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Braswell, Attaway, even if Rocket is your guy. And we'll see. We'll wait to see how things play out. A lot of these things are what ifs. What ifs? What is it going to look like? That's why, again, when we talk about the strengths, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to talk about, but it also kind of overlaps with some of the things we're talking about now, which is a lot of it's wishful thinking. A lot of it is, okay, assuming these guys are going to get it, things are going to click quickly because they've proven it at other schools.
Yeah, most definitely. I fully expect Oscar Attaway to be, the go-to guy when you need tough yards. I expect him to be, next to Rocket in terms of where they want to your top two running backs, and you do need two running backs in the SEC. So I expect OA3 to be, the man, just because of his tape, right? When you look at his tape, he was able to do, a lot of things on tape. He's able to get through the middle, break out runs through the tackles, and then also, be able to get outside. So again, I've high hopes for this. And, Mike, you mentioned, easing Rocket in there. I think it's going to be interesting because, again, you don't want to push him back too early, and then, he's hurt, and then you're left, we're having to rely on OA3 to get every single yard. And, that's just going to beat him down by the end of the year. And when you talk about your schedule and everything. So again, you got to be careful with it. You can't dance with the devil too much because again, he's going to get hurt, and then your whole game plan and everything going forward will be foiled. And then Burley also makes a good point too, especially since Lenoris can run. I think this is going to be an interesting wrinkle too, to see how much they wheel him out, whether or not, because we saw how much Spencer Rattler had to take off last year, and that in part was because of the offensive line health. Knock on wood, everything else is good there. But there is design, run plays in this offense, and then also plays where it's a high percentage where Lenoris can take off. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how much Dowell is going to run him versus and how many hits he wants him taken. And that's also going to come down to, watching Lenore slide and everything and figuring all that out. So I think that will be an interesting wrinkle to this offense for sure.
So if you're just joining us, we're talking about some of the strengths, weaknesses, concerns, anything else you want to talk about as we look ahead to South Carolina's offense. We are just about, I'd say about a month and a half away till the Gamecocks report. We're about a month away until SEC Media Days in Dallas. So things are going to really start to crank up here. And from a recruiting standpoint, if you've been paying attention to Gamecock Central, you know that there's been a lot of welcome homes over the last couple of days. Some of those players have gone public. If you're not a subscriber to GC, sign up today. Just $1 for your first month's subscription. And you're getting more than just football coverage. Certainly with everything that's going on in the world of Gamecock athletics, 3 coaching hires within this past week for head coaching spots at USC. But you're also getting basketball news. You're also getting baseball, which there's been plenty of over the last couple of days. And certainly when you think about these next couple weeks, it's going to be critical to see who is staying and who won't be back. Ethan Petrie, he took to social media yesterday, did a Gamecock Central takeover, Garnet Trust Hour. Gamecock Central takeover hour, Garnet Trust Hour, all on 107.5 The Game. He was speaking about his first impressions of the new ball coach. Certainly something I highly recommend people going back and taking a listen to. Very encouraging if you're worried about Ethan potentially leaving. Obviously, he has decisions still to make, but makes you feel a little bit better because of some speculation going back to last week after Mark Kingston was fired. Having said all that, though, let's talk about some strengths. And where I want to start with is this offensive line. Now, I know. Again, like we were just talking about, some of this is wishful thinking. Wishful thinking. But when you look at that offensive line room, and I just wrote a story about this the other day, we've been doing breakdowns on every positional group, every positional room since the end of spring practices, and we're practically done. I think the only ones I have left to do are wide receiver and the special teams room. So offensive line, the biggest thing that stands out to me when I did the breakdown of this, and this goes back to obviously seeing some things too in the spring, there's just so much experience, a lot of depth. Now, when we go back to last season, Joe, when you have 12, 13 injuries on the offensive line, or excuse me, you're playing 12, 13 different players on the offensive line because of injuries. In the moment, I look at it as a glass half empty, and then it can be looked at as a glass half full notion later on. Because you look at it in the moment, Aluatos and Babalade, right? You have a guy like Trevon Baugh. Ideally, do you want those two guys to go out there and be your starters against Georgia and some of the competition? Certainly not. Now, both those players held their own. They did a phenomenal job. But now they have experience. Now they've also gone through a spring. So in the moment, yeah, that's not what you're looking for. But because of circumstances, because of the injuries, because of losing a guy like Jalen Nichols, your left tackle in the spring game a year ago, combine that with losing Cason Henry in the first series of the game, week 1 against North Carolina, you were really forced to throw guys in there, try to figure out not only, 5 guys that we trust, but 5 guys that we can trust playing as a unit together. That's tough. But That experience helps you this year. It also helps you when you add in guys like a Vershawn Lee, who is extremely versatile. We talked about last year how Nick Gargiulo is essentially like a utility player in baseball. Vershawn Lee is just that too. He can play at both guard positions. He can play at center. He has experience of playing at right tackle. So when you look at some of the competition that will be going on heading into camp, and I've shared what my prediction is for the week 1 starter. You can find that out on Gamecock Central. But I think more than anything, Joe, that competition, especially at the guard position, I'd say left guard, center, if you feel comfortable enough, you can kick Vershawn Lee out to right tackle.
Yeah.
It's not going to be one of those things where I think people are just automatically going to get roles. I mean, there's going to be some real good competition on the offensive line. I think whatever we see is going to be a hell of a lot better of a product than what we saw last year, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting to see how that whole the position battle between Case and Henry, and then if you feel comfortable enough, kicking Vershawn Lee out there, I think that might be one of the better moves that they can make. But again, just depends on the health of Case and Henry. They've wanted him to get healthy and be a force on this offensive line for a while now. So now it's just, it's time to step up and time to be the man. I did like this comment from Russell real quick. The tight end room is the most intriguing to me. Josh Simon, but then who's next? Does someone step up, or is it Luke Doty, tight end too? I think someone steps up. I've been hearing a lot of good things about Michael Smith. The fact that he's just put on a ton of weight, the fact that he's been running a lot, getting a lot of reps. And so I think Michael Smith will be the guy next to Josh Simon. Can't forget about Brady Hunt either. Obviously the tight end from Ball State who was brought in and also had the news around him possibly leaving for Texas A&M, decided to stay at South Carolina. So I think Josh Simon obviously leading the way there. But in terms of guys that could step up, I think Michael Smith is my pick for sure.
Yeah, when you look at that tight end room and what took place last season, because of the injuries on the offensive line, we didn't get to see Josh Simon be the Josh Simon that I think we will see him be this year. Because guys like him, even Trey Knox, who was banged up for a portion of last season, they had to come down and they were more attached to the line of scrimmage, and they had to block more to help out a banged up South Carolina offensive line. So while I think we'll still see that at times, I think we could see a lot of 2 tight end sets because of the versatility that this tight end room has. And I see that you mentioned Luke Doty. Could we see different packages where Luke's in there and maybe he's down blocking? Where things have gone in football, especially with that tight end position, it's really, you see a lot of hybrid guys. You see a lot of guys that have played a role where it's like tight end / wide receiver, right? It's like that middleman. Luke can do whatever you need him to be. And I certainly think he'll be someone that we'll see out there a good bit. And can I see him blocking down at times? Sure. I think he'll do multiple things. But Joe, what you mentioned is not only do you have Josh Simon, but you're bringing in a guy like Brady Hunt, Ball State transfer, dealt with an ankle injury this past season, but he shined as a redshirt freshman in 2022. He received several first-team All-American honors, caught 46 passes for 498 yards, 5 touchdowns that season. 5 touchdowns were tied for the 12th most among any tight end in college football that year. Mackey watch list this past season, which is given annually to the most outstanding tight end in college. He is certainly someone that wants to prove people wrong as he comes back from his injury. Some other guys to pay attention to, Connor Cox. He mainly played special teams last year. Another big body guy, though. You mentioned Michael Smith, number 11 tight end coming out of the 2024 class, 6'4", 245. Mentioned that he put some weight on. Yeah, put up 20 pounds of good weight prior to his senior season. I'm sure he's only put more good weight on getting involved with South Carolina's strength and conditioning program. Nick Eltness, another guy that comes in here, makes a difference on special team, transferred on in from Florida. So, and then Reed McKisnis too, coming in, redshirt last year. They have some big body tight ends, but I agree with you. It's going to start with Josh Simon. It's going to start with a guy like Brady Hunt. Do we see Michael Smith get in there? Possibly. I think the big question is, if he's not playing a lot early on, What type of impact can he make on special teams? Because of a lot of players that I just mentioned there, right? Connor Cox, Elksness. These are guys that, despite not playing much at tight end last year, the reason why they traveled, the reason why, I mean, there's some injuries too in there, but the reason why they were seeing playing time is because of the impact they made on special teams. If you're not making an impact on special teams and you're not going to play potentially, especially early on, potentially a lot of snaps at tight end early on, the only way you're going to make the travel squad is if you're going out there making an impact on special teams. So I think that's the big thing for Michael Smith. I think we will see him play more as the season goes on. Does he preserve that red shirt, especially if everyone stays healthy? I think it's possible. And that's not to say that he's not a guy that can come in here and make a difference right away. I think there's just some guys in that room when you look at the big picture. There's guys in that room that can make a difference as pass catchers. There's also guys that can make a difference in the run game, but there's also guys who can make an impact on special teams. And the reality is you're not going to be able to bring every tight end to every game on the road. You might not see every tight end suit up for a home game, for crying out loud. So that's something I would say about that. As far as the running back room is concerned, Joe, we talked about the concerns. In a perfect world, especially come week 2, week 3, this room is as healthy as can be. And that's not to say they won't be healthy, knock on wood, that they won't be healthy coming out of fall camp. But by that time, you would expect that room to really start to take those next couple steps. And when you look at that schedule early on, you got a tough matchup against Kentucky. And I say tough because, look, South Carolina's been fortunate. They've beat the Wildcats the last 2 years. They need to go. They need to go to Lexington this year. That's never easy. And I think being able to go out there and setting the tone, we talk about that potentially being one of those swing games this year. If your running back room can give you what a lot of us are expecting from that room, which is not just production, being able to run the foot, but being able to make an impact in the run game, being able to make an impact out of the backfield as pass catchers, help you with your pass pro, help a young quarterback out like Lenore Sellers. If they can do those things, it really opens up your playbook. Because and I can't remember who mentioned it earlier, but yeah, Sellers can run. Sellers is going to give you more mobility than Rattler did. But at the same time, too, there's a lot of questions in that wide receiver room. So if you can get the run game going, especially with the versatile quarterback, guess what happens? They're going to have to put an extra guy down in the box. You might only have one high safety, and that creates more one-on-one matchups. And with the speed South Carolina has in that wide receiver room, if you're able to get the run game going, a little PAP, little RPO, a little whatever, boot, you're going to be able to do a lot, and it's really going to be able to enhance South Carolina's offense. But that running back room, it needs to be playing on a different level this year. No question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, I got one more point about the running back room, one more positive about the running back room. Then we'll hit some ads and wrap things up, as I know you got to get over to Coach Maneri's introductory press conference. But yeah, my positive thing about the running back room is that on paper, this running back room should be able to do whatever they want, right? I mean, if Rocket Sanders is fully healthy, again, knock on wood, and then you have a dynamic back and Oscar Attaway, and, you add in the mix Juju McDowell and Jawarn Howell, like I think it's a perfect storm of, all the weapons that you need all in one place, right? So you need everyone to stay healthy. You need everyone to get between the tackles. I think with the dynamic, ability of Lenoris to run, like you mentioned, adds another wrinkle to it. So if everyone's healthy, I think there's a lot of different things that Dowell Loggins can do with this running back room alongside, or pound the rock, right? I think it's an identity that this team has missed for a while. For these last couple of years, they haven't been able to pound the rock at an efficient rate. So it's going to be good to see if Dowell can find a way to get it done. He's got a lot of weapons in his room to do so. So again, they literally just have to show up and execute. But Mike, first ad of the day is our good friend over at My Perfect Franchise, Andy Luedecke. Tell our friends about him and how they can get started with Andy.
Yeah, shout out to one of our sponsors, Andy Luedecke at myperfectfranchise.net. Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Looking for a side hustle while working your current job? Wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Well, guess what? Andy can help you. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner himself, and he helps people find franchises that fit in their skill sets, financial requirements, and time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help. If you have any questions about business ownership, reach out to Andy Luedecke. That number is 404-973-9901, and let him know that Gamecock Central sent you. And today's show is also brought to you by our good friend, Clint Hammond, Joe.
Yeah, Clint Hammond is our good friend over at the Movement Mortgage Network. In need of help with your mortgage? Call on our good friend Clint Hammond at the Movement Mortgage Network. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003, which allows him to help everyone from the first-time home buyer to the complicated and complex jumbo buyer, whether you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance. Nothing is more important than a well-thought-out financial strategy that comes with 5-star customer service. He's even helped out our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth with their mortgages. So give our guy Clint a call. He's above us on all of our GC Live programming at 803-422-6797. Once again, 803-422-6797 for all of your mortgage needs. And you can also find him at clinthammond.com.
All right. We talked about practically every room when it comes to some strengths that they could have, right? I don't want to seem like I'm not high on the wide receiver room. I just think there's so many unknowns. Now, I think there are players who excite me. There's players, even some being true freshmen, like Amazio Bennett. There's players that excite me, but I think it's one of those things that it's more so with that room than anything. Wishful thinking. And they need to be able to do a lot because you have a young quarterback out there. Now, I think one thing that can help them, Joe, we talk about being able to create separation in that room. And that's one thing that really concerns me. And I don't know if that's necessarily fair to that room when I say it's a concern, but we haven't seen them out there. I think one thing that can help them with being able to create separation is the fact that you do have a quarterback that's mobile. And if he's moving around, it makes things more difficult for defensive backs to be able to stay on wide receivers, stay on tight ends. So I think not only do the wide receivers need to help Lenoris out, I think Lenoris can help himself out in a lot of ways. We obviously talked about how the run game could do that. No question, right about that. Duh. But being able to create separation, Lenoris can help himself out too. And I'm sure with what we saw at times last year, but add in what we saw from a wrinkle standpoint in the spring game just a little bit. I know the offensive play calling, as Dal Loggins pointed it out, it was going to be vanilla. It was very vanilla. But I think we will see Lenoris get out of the pocket more. I think the question now becomes this, and here's the tricky part about all this when we talk about the offense. Even after the first game, I'd say even after the second game, until we get to week 3, for teams that are preparing to go up against Lenoris Sellers, you truly don't know what you're going to get from him as far as how to defend him. You can go back and watch some of the things he did in garbage time last year. You can go back, and I'm sure they'll even watch what he did in the spring game, not just this past year, but going back to 2 years ago. But until you actually see him out there on the field, it's going to be trickier to figure out, okay, how are we going to defend him? You might have an idea, okay, we're talking about some of these things. Well, he's mobile, he can do this and that, but we haven't actually seen it in a real game in meaningful time. I think back to a couple of years ago, Jason Brown, and I love Jason Brown, and what a phenomenal job he did during that Florida game. Comes in, puts up 40-plus points, musical cheers. You talk about musical cheers, that room that year, my goodness. But the following week, what happens? Well, they essentially just put out 2 QB spies. And Jason, when the pressure was there, as we saw in Florida, he would always spin out to the outside. Well, that following week, what happens? double quarterback spy, he wasn't really able to do that, and it forced him to have to step up in the pocket. And that was just something that probably throughout his entire football career, going back to his days, St. Francis, even going back to high school, that he was probably able to get away with. Heading into that Florida game, yeah, you could probably go back and watch a little bit of the tape from those days, but until you actually see what it looks like at South Carolina, it's difficult to know. We hear about this with quarterbacks of the NFL. Sometimes teams will go back and watch a young quarterback who doesn't have a lot of tape yet in the NFL, what they did in college. It's tricky. I know Gamecock fans, it drives them nuts. Historically, you go back and, some of the quarterbacks over the years, going back to even the Kenny Thrill days, where you'll have quarterbacks come in and they don't have a lot of tape. They don't have a lot of experience. Maybe it's their first time starting a collegiate game. And guess what? They go out there and they put up incredible numbers against you. And you're not alone. It happens in college football. Does it always happen? No, because obviously at the end of the day, you still need to have some pieces around you to make that work, that train work. I think for Lenoris, getting to week 3, knowing that, okay, now the tape's out there. Now the tape's out there. Teams are going to know how to defend me. It's going to challenge him to adjust in some shape, way, or form. It might not be as noticeable as some of the things that we're talking about with Jason Brown and spinning outside of the pocket, but there's going to be something. Couple things probably, but there's going to be something from his game that he's been able to get away with his entire life, and he's going to have to make an adjustment to it. And I think that's a big thing that we're also going to just have to wait and see. I mean, we could sit here and talk about, okay, he's done this, he's done that, and I think he's going to do some good things. I really do. I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But he's going to be hit at some point with that challenge of having to adjust his game just a little bit, because that's part of it. That's part of it. You can get away with things in high school. At this level, you're not going to be able to do everything the same exact way. He's going to have to make adjustments. And if he's able to do that, which from listening to him, from listening to the coaches talk about him, I think he's the type of player that's not going to be stubborn. And I think he's going to only learn more. What we've heard about him from being in the classroom, the way he takes notes, the way he watches film, I think he's truly a student of the game, and he's going to be able to make those adjustments quickly. And that will help him be able to overcome any type of adversity early on, because again, it's expected when you have a young quarterback. It's expected at some point that you will have to overcome some of these hurdles because it's going to be new to you.
Yeah, most definitely, Mike. Well said. Anything
else you want to talk about before we wrap things up? Offense here?
Nah, Mike, I think you just hit on all of it. Took the words right out of my mouth with some of the academics and the leadership stuff for Lenoris. I mean, it's going to come down to that ultimately, right? I mean, he's checking every box so far. So, again, just has to keep checking boxes and everything should take care of itself.
And the other part of it too, Joe, we talk about how Lenoris is going to have to make adjustments over time. Same could be said about Dal Loggins. For the people out there that aren't sold on Dal, which it is a head scratcher to me because the guy's only been here for one season, and he dealt with an offensive line that had to play, 12, 13 guys for crying out loud. And they still were able to have a quarterback put up ridiculous numbers, a wide receiver that finished second as far as receiving yards in a season in program history. But whatever. Having said all that, he's going to have an opportunity to really prove his worth and why South Carolina wanted him here in the first place. So I'm excited to see that. As excited as I am to see what Lenoris can do, I'm excited for the chess match that we're going to see with Loggins, especially I'd say around that week 3, week 4 time frame, and what he does to really help,
Yeah, most definitely. And we saw him adjust last season.
Can you bring up Travis Ford's comment for a minute?
Which one?
So Travis says, "Don't scratch your head, Loggins," and that's not how you spell it. Was available because he was regarded as the worst OC in the NFL. Travis, I want to ask you a question. Can you name the teams he was coaching for? Can you name the teams for me? Because he wasn't in any situation that was good. Let's not act like Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes was his quarterback. He was dealing with some of the worst teams in the NFL. Okay? There's a reason why you look at some of these offensive coordinators throughout the NFL, why a lot of these guys, they get changed more than friggin' socks. It is such a lazy thing. Oh, this is what he did in the NFL. Well, guess what? How good of a coach was Nick Saban in the NFL? Good thing Alabama didn't friggin' pay attention to that, huh? Comes back to college and he friggin' continues to have success. That is such a lazy friggin' bogus thing to say. It's a totally different game. College and the NFL is a totally different game. It's lazy. It's lazy. So stop with that. If he has a crap season as an offensive coordinator this season, has a crap one next season, then okay. But don't compare the two. Don't compare the two. My goodness. And Travis, not seeming like I'm sorry if it seems like I'm piling on for you. I've seen this so much, and it's just it drives me nuts still. It drives me friggin' nuts. But we'll take a deep breath. We'll end it with some positive. Travis, I hope you have a great week. I hope you have a great week. And I hope everyone else has a good weekend too. If you missed any of our show, head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page where you can watch this show in its entirety. Or if you're a podcast listener, head on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network. Both are free. And again, if you're not subscribed to Gamecock Central, head on over to GC. Sign up for your first month for just $1. Get football, baseball, basketball, everything else in there. A lot going on, as always is the case for Gamecock Athletics. SEC Media Day, just 1 month away. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuva. Appreciate everyone that tuned in today. Again, enjoy the rest of your Thursday and enjoy